Harvey back in 2017. This one seems to be hitting just even harder.
Yeah, George, thanks. I'm really worried at this point. I was also a FEMA employee, believe it or not, deployed into Florida in field operations for Hurricane Ivan in 2004. It hit the same or roughly the same area of the Panhandle, and we had a little bit more time. That was the fourth hurricane at the end of a 6-week period of time in which we had the entire state evacuated, unfortunately, 3 times in a row. And so people had a lot of heightened awareness. I look at this now, and I know we've all reported it, and what we're doing here today is extremely important here, providing good information to people to allow them to make good decisions. But I'm worried that the evacuation rates weren't high enough. I'm worried that we didn't have enough time to prepare adequately as a community from the local and state levels. And I'm worried and reminded to be a little bit somber at this point. Unfortunately, history tells me that we'll see some death as a result of this.
Tom, what is the key to getting those evacuation rates up? Was this simply a factor of speed here?
Yeah, it's a little bit of speed. It's a little bit of time to act, right? At some point, some procedures take a little bit longer than you have, and so you have to make trade-off decisions. It's mostly about speed and time, but it's also messaging. I think a lot of what we did as we saw this crop up was understandably start reporting on Florida, but the people of Georgia didn't necessarily get all the attention that they're now getting, but they're going to see hurricane force winds and rain.
Take us behind the scenes,
though, George, that's going to leave behind damage that's going to last for years.
Take us behind the scenes now. Of course, you're not there right now, but you've been in situations like this, behind the scenes in the White House, in FEMA right now. What's happening?
Yeah, I've spoken to Administrator Long and his senior team today and leading up to it this week. I have a pretty good sense of what's happening. People are mobilized. The entire workforce is shifting all over the country to bring resources, human resources, some of whom are tired, into this region, into this effort. People are getting into their battle rhythm of 24-hour operations, 12-hour shifts and operation cycles and periods where they do planning and so forth. But right now, as we sit here, it's a messaging game and a little bit of a waiting game. Everything that we could do is pretty much done, and now we have to wait to kind of let the dust settle and get in as quickly as possible.
Can't go in until the storm passes. Okay, Tom, thanks very much. I want to go over to Sam Champion in Miami. And Sam, what should people who are in the middle of this right now caught, what should they be doing?
Hey, George, we want to get people ready. I do have a headline for you right now, and this is very important information just came in. The center of this storm did make landfall near Mexico Beach, 155-mile-per-hour winds with this storm. Now, remember, a Category 5 is 156. So we are at the top level of a Cat 4. The Hurricane Center will go back and look at all of the gauges, look at all of the readings to see whether this was indeed a Cat 4 or Cat 5 at landfall. But this is an historic event in this location and for the coast of the U.S. This is rarefied territory for a storm to become this big, this strong, and make landfall anywhere in the United States.
That is a headline right there,
George,
the landfall.
one thing,
wait, before you go there, because I want to go back to Ginger right now, because she's on the scene where Michael just made landfall. Ginger. I think we may have lost Ginger. David Muir, are you there?
I am here. I am here, and of course we all are thinking about Ginger right now since she is in precisely the location where this hurricane just made landfall, and I'm sure we will go back to her as soon as we can for folks at home who are watching and obviously thinking about her as we all are, and our team right there. Looking out this window right here, this is the hotel we're in Panama City. We are not far from where Ginger is. Winds are now gusting here at 129 miles per hour. The SUVs that you can sort of see through that front door, we're not standing out there because there are significant pieces of debris and parts of buildings now ripping off of the building and flying through the air. So we've stepped inside for obvious reasons. But those SUVs were literally lifting somewhat right out of the air. You can see the front end of that SUV on the left just bobbing in the wind. As huge pieces of rooftops literally fly past the front window. You can hear the alarms going off in the background here. And Dale, I want to show folks at home these windows on the right-hand side. When you talk about construction, and obviously the codes have changed as we've seen the ferocity of these hurricanes through the years, but this window is an example of testing storm-proof windows. The management here at the hotel told us that this was up to code, but you can see the water coming right through the window, and you can see the window sort of buckling in the wind. It's a real test of infrastructure all throughout Florida's Panhandle. And down on the ground here, Dale, you can see these are parts of the building, the cement that's come off the side of the building. You see that there on the floor. All of this as we learned that the radar in Tallahassee has now come offline, and we're not getting any more weather information. That's one location where it's simply been overwhelmed by the weather. I don't want people to be alarmed by that fire alarm. It's simply a signal that the power has gone out inside the hotel where so many of the families here in this community have come to seek shelter, as we report here too. I just want you to hear the wind right outside this doorway. Just take a listen to this. We knew this was going to be a powerful hurricane as we watched it intensify over the last 48 hours from a Cat 3, then to a Cat 4. And as we just heard from Sam Champion, when it made landfall, and of course they will go back and they will study this, it made landfall 1 mile per hour less than a Category 5 hurricane. The fact that it was a Category 4 already made history here, but this notion that it was almost as powerful as a Cat 5 is simply stunning here. I want to get back to meteorologist Rob Marciano, who's also down here, Rob. And as we await to hear from Ginger, just describe for us, if you will, what you're seeing right now.
We're just west of your position, a little closer to the beach. We were just on the beach, and we said we would take you to the other side of the street, the windward side, if you will, as this storm now makes landfall and the winds begin to shift. We are in about on the second floor of a parking structure, an open-air stairwell, so you can get a sense of just how ferocious these winds are. Looking down the parking lots here off the main strip, and the main strip, the two-lane highway there, that is all but desolate as debris continues to swirl past us. You can hear that roar that David mentioned, whistling through parts of this parking structure. But you also hear, and then see from time to time, shingles and sheet metal being ripped off different structures. Obviously, the structures that are quite made as well, they're the ones most susceptible. Well, we've seen everybody take a hit, every building here take a hit of some sort.
Rob, thank you. We are in our same location, and I've got to tell you, a significant scare for the families who are inside this hotel with us. As you're looking out through the window, you can see the roof of the hotel that we had been standing out there. That was the shelter for a Category 4 hurricane. That has now come down on those SUVs that I was just telling you about earlier. Listen, the wind is picking up so much. We're gonna take a break. Send it back to you, George. I want to make sure everybody's safe.
We've got to get inside. Those winds so fierce right now. And Sam Champion back in Miami, we're seeing the power, the destructive power of those winds right now. So intense.
George, we're all watching something together that very few of us get a chance to see, and I've been doing this for more than 30, 35 years, but a daytime hit of a hurricane that's a high 4, near a 5, moving through. This gives people a chance to see exactly how powerful this kind of storm is, and our crews have done everything right. We've put people in safe positions, but still have cameras so you can see the damage. The one thing, George, I want to remind people is that now that we have the center of this storm moving on shore, the storm will not get stronger, but it will stay this strength for a few hours longer as it slowly weakens. So I want to talk to people who are inland, away from the coast right now, and I mean Tallahassee into South Georgia, that southeastern corner of Alabama. All of you, I need you to kind of pay attention to what we're going to tell you right now. Because as this storm now moves away and you're away from the flooding, if you have no connection with this storm surge and you're far enough inland, then what I need you to do, if you're with your family and you have information about what's going on, when this wind picks up like this and gets this strong, we will have 90 to 110 mile per hour winds well inland, in Tallahassee, also in Georgia, and that little corner of Alabama. So take your family into an interior hallway, drag every mattress that you have that you can get your hands on, and take it with you. Bring all your supplies with you. If you have an interior bathroom that has no windows, if you have an interior walk-in closet, walls are your friend against wind, tight walls. So every corner makes the building stronger. And the reason we like bathrooms is the plumbing running through those 2x4s within the wall actually helps make that wall stronger, and you can use the tub to get in and pull a mattress over you, much like you would a tornado, to protect yourself from debris. Because I've been in these buildings when they fall apart like this, when the constant wind of a Category 4 or 5 hurricane tears them apart, and there will be flying debris. There'll be glass, there'll be insulation, there'll be wood, there'll be nails in that wood, all of it kind of moving through. So you want to put yourself in your home, an interior hallway, that walk-in closet, that bathroom, put everybody in with all your supplies, and stay for the duration.
And
this
Sam,
storm will be with you from 6 to 10 hours.
And Sam, I should say, that's exactly what Ginger has done. You know, we went to Ginger a few minutes ago, and we had lost her, and we couldn't hear from her. But we have now heard from her. Even though she's lost in her crew, they've lost the ability to broadcast. But as she's telling us now, she is safe. Wanted to make sure everybody knew that as well. And Sam, you're giving good information to the people who are in the path of the storm right now. As we see that map right there, it's going to be several intense hours ahead for everybody in the path of Hurricane Michael, because it's, as you were saying, it's going to kind of keep its structure as it moves quickly.
Yeah, this storm was very powerful, and it was kind of operating on its own. It didn't need to feed on the shallow waters of the Gulf. When you have a system that's a 4 or a 5, it just spins on its own, and it takes a long time to unwind it. So we will have this 3-4 in inland areas of the Florida Panhandle now. So Tallahassee and cities like that will be seeing exactly what we have with the winds. They just won't be facing a lot of the storm surge, and Georgia needs to know that too. But this storm is very different from the storm that we just broadcast a few weeks ago in Florence, when we're talking about it being a wet storm and a flooding storm. Once we get past that impact of the water up against the shoreline, we're talking about this storm being a damaging windstorm. So you really have to put yourself in your home and in any building you're in a secure location. One thing I want to tell you about hurricane-proof glass. The glass itself, that pane of glass, you can take a baseball bat and you can hammer it. It will not shatter to about 130+ mile-per-hour winds. But what seals the window to the building is not hurricane-proof, and those windows can often come out. So I don't want you to have the safety that if you're standing by hurricane glass watching this, you can watch it. George, you can't.
No, you cannot. Good counsel there, Sam. Thank you. I want to go back to Rob Marciano on Panama City Beach as we see so much debris being thrown around by those winds. Rob.
George? Hi, guys. Sorry about that, George. My earpiece getting filled with water, as you can imagine. The amount of rain now coming out of these clouds and blowing sideways, slapping me in the face, and just filling my ear canal with water. We're on the other side of this parking structure on the ground level, obviously. Look at that. Someone commuted to work on a bike, and they may be one of the folks at our hotel who are not going anywhere anytime too soon. Wanted to give you this vantage point. And again, we're somewhat protected by this structure here, so the wind's not nearly as ferocious as they would be if I were to step out in a more precarious position about 30 feet or 50 feet that way. Every once in a while, we get these puffs. And I think Sam mentioned it. Along this high wall, there are little vortices that wobbles inland that have these puffs, if you want to call it a euphemism, that are really intense. It can easily knock you down. Those palm trees, check it out, how they are bending in this breeze of full-on hurricane strength. They are not coming down. There's a reason that palm trees are in the tropics, because they can take this wind. So when this storm gets a little further inland, Tallahassee, your next point, they got some tuck trees that are tall, pine trees as well. And they're going to come down. So we've got that 1-2 punch happening with this. But this, I've been in the western eye wall of a couple of storms, one actually notable. Hurricane Ivan back in 2004 also came in this area, a little bit farther to our west. And this side of the eye wall, I can assure you, is not any more fun than the other side. It is brutal here, and we're in this for another good couple of hours, George. And then the wind shifts, and we've got a whole other set of issues, which we'll bring it to you live. And daylight, as Sam mentioned, it's an unusual event that you, the viewer at home, get to witness the power of Mother Nature firsthand.
It is coming in so strong, so fierce. I want to go now to Ken Graham, the director of the National Hurricane Center. And Ken, what is the most important thing you want people to know about this hurricane right now?
Yeah, we're really worried about, of course, the wind that you're seeing, some of the images from everybody. This is intense wind. I mean, landfall at 155 miles an hour, so structural damage, trees down, power outages, and that's just part of it. I mean, we're looking at some of the readings here. Panama City already gusting to 129 miles an hour. Now, some of this could be well away, so once you start making landfall, even these rain bands away from the center of the storm could start having hurricane force winds. So this isn't just coastal, this is going to stretch pretty far inland.
And Ken, talk about the path that we're going to see over the next several hours and what could happen to the hurricane.
And look at this. So we do expect some weakening once you make landfall, so you start to see that. But here's the issue. When you come ashore that strong, you know, a Category 4, 155 miles an hour, we still are forecasting to still be a hurricane on the Alabama-Georgia state line, a tropical storm even tomorrow, looking at the Georgia-South Carolina line. So this isn't just coastal. You're catastrophic damage right along the coast. But you'll start seeing the rainfall and gusty winds well into Georgia and the Carolinas. You can still see some power outages in those areas.
And Ken, we heard Ginger say this before. This is the strongest storm to hit the United States since Camille back in 1969.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I looked at some of the stats, and here's an interesting one, too. We got statistics going back to 1851 on these hurricanes, and this one here is the first Cat 4 in the Florida Panhandle, so historic in that regard. The other one, 919 millibars, makes it the top 3 or 4 lowest pressures of U.S. landfalling hurricanes as well. So, you know, a very strong system, catastrophic damage associated with the storm surge, the rain, and also the wind.
My goodness. Okay, Ken Graham, thanks very much. Thanks for your time. I want to go back to Maggie Rulli in Panama City Beach. Maggie.
George, not sure if you can hear that behind me. The whistling and the wind just continues to intensify. And the biggest change I've noticed about in the past half hour is just this wind you see is now constant. There is no break in these wind gusts, and they keep getting stronger and stronger. We were out there not too long ago, and I've had to keep moving further inside under the hotel awning just to stay safe. And it's a good thing we did. The second we moved inside, a huge sign from down the street ripped off its foundation, came barreling down just behind us. So we're staying more inside for now. And again, the biggest change is just these winds are intense, they're constant, and you can hear them whipping past your ears nonstop, George.
And Maggie, you've been there for several hours this morning. When did people start to move off the streets, and when did you really have the feel that everybody was hunkered down inside?
You know, I have to say, at first there was some draw to be outside, the anticipation. We were out here, like I said, since 3 a.m. this morning when it was still relatively quiet. And that's when you saw a lot more people, especially media, outside walking around, taking videos. But just about an hour and a half ago is when things really started to get intense. And I think people realized this is the time to take this storm seriously. The governor's been urging us. It's a strong Category 4, pushing 150 miles per hour. So this is not something to mess around with. And once we started seeing and hearing this wind whip up and seeing that debris, that's when everyone really pushed inside and started to take shelter.
Okay, Maggie, thanks very much. I want to go back to Sam Champion right now. And Sam, you know, boy, as we see those trees swaying in the wind, this hurricane hitting in the same week we learned from the United Nations that we're reaching an actual crisis point, the idea of climate change. Talk about what we know and what we don't know about the impact of climate change on intense weather events like this hurricane.
So, George, you know, when we get down to what we do know and what we believe and what we don't know, I would put that in 3 separate categories. Because what we know has been proven that we know that in increased levels of carbon in the atmosphere has certainly done a lot to put more energy in the atmosphere, certainly done a lot to put more water in our oceans. And so that, we believe, will make the storms a little bit stronger. But in the next 2 categories of what we believe and what we don't know, it comes down to how many hands we have on deck for science. We have to be able to, and there are lots of scientists who will tell you they will point to these stronger storms as being contributed by climate change, to being stronger because of climate change. But we really need to put hands on deck to be able to prove that the warmer waters of the ocean, by the way, this storm was moving through waters in the Gulf that were 2 to 4 degrees warmer than normal for this time of year. So when you talk about warmer water making a difference on stronger hurricanes, this is the kind of thing we have to put together and show to people, you know, and George, it's just one of those things where we know it, we believe it, we just have to have the science and the proof to back it up and show people. George, one of the things that the Hurricane Center just did was talk about the inland path of this storm, and while we have everybody everybody's attention because we have those incredible images of this thing making landfall. I wanted to talk about I wanted to go one step further than Georgia into Carolinas, if that's okay with you guys, if you have time for that. So we noticed by the time we get to Dothan, Alabama, and Albany, Georgia, we've got a Category 2 hurricane inland. Category 2 hurricane. This is going to be disastrous damage for South Georgia. Then the other thing, we're going to watch that cruise through Georgia and get into South Carolina. And at that point, we have about 45-mile-per-hour winds with the center of this storm. It's a tropical storm, an inland tropical storm in South Carolina and North Carolina, dumping 6 to 10 inches of rain in the same areas that flooded with Florence. And I wanted to give those people a heads up on that, George, happening Thursday into Friday for them.
Yeah, this storm is not nearly done. Okay, Sam, thanks very much. I want to go back to David. You're in Panama City Beach, where we've already seen so much destruction, David.
Yeah, just extraordinary, George, to put this in perspective. As you've been likely saying, we were in sort of a stairwell here, a brick fortified stairwell with so many of the families that I showed you earlier. But then to emerge and be able to see the email again, third strongest hurricane to hit the U.S., not since Hurricane Camille in 1969. Everybody here on the crew, everybody is safe. I just wanted to share that with you. But I also wanted to give you an idea of, this is what we had showed you earlier. The front end of the hotel coming straight down. That was where, obviously, we had been reporting earlier in the special, and you can see that roof down on a number of cars that were out there. Those were some of the SUVs that were parked there on purpose, so that it would sort of protect the team, as we were reporting early on. But you could feel this, George, as the hurricane grew closer, and you can actually still see through the window over there just the ferocity.
And David, the families that you're hunkered down with,
water that is whipping by.
Do the families you're hunkered down with, do they have any idea yet what's happened to their homes, or is it way too early to know?
Yeah, I think it's just absolutely impossible. In fact, when we were in the hallway with many of them, we couldn't even get out on our cell phones. It just gives you an idea of, when we're in the middle of these natural disasters, the cell service immediately goes out because everybody is competing for what little cell power there remains. Actually, we're just going to back up a little bit from this door. You can actually sense when the pressure changes inside the hotel. You can see it in the rattling glass, but you can actually feel it, and you can hear it too, George. The wind, it's just incredible. And I see those outer windows that we were told were up to code. They're actually buckling somewhat, and we'll have to see if they're able to withstand this hurricane before Michael's actually done passing through. I should tell you, George, you did ask about the families. So many of them, when they saw us back away and move into the stairwell, they too went into hallways on the interior part of the hotel. A lot of them are in the hallways here, and which is the smart thing to do. They have been following the advice of people here in the hotel and managers, and when they were told to seek safety in the hallways, they did. And we should mention that this morning, with just a few hours left, we heard from the administrator at FEMA, the head of FEMA, saying that the time to leave was over. We heard from Rick Scott, who said this hurricane can kill. And in fact, we know it already did long before it made landfall here in the U.S. It was responsible for a dozen or more deaths on its way here. So let's just hope with what we have witnessed here today, which is, quite frankly, and I've covered many of these hurricanes, something I haven't seen before.
And David, you could say we know now this is just the beginning. The cleanup effort here is going to be massive. It's going to take days and weeks.
Oh, there's no question. Even when we were still outside, George, to see the number of trees that came down within the first 15 minutes of just the outer bands of this hurricane arriving, and the power lines, they came down immediately. The power went out in the hotel. And it's important for folks who are watching this unfold at home that we have not forgotten about Alabama and Georgia. They are in the path of this storm next. The hurricane is going to be moving very quickly, unlike what we saw in Florence. And there's a significant worry that the power could be out for days, if not weeks, where this hurricane is headed next, even when it's done. With its damage right here in the Florida Panhandle, which is just extraordinary. I should mention, I know you shared it with viewers on the air earlier. Everybody here on the team is safe. Ginger Z, that's one thing I was really happy to see when I got out of that stairwell, George, is that she tweeted as well that she's safe. But we're all watching those images on social media the way you are too, and to see that home lifted off its foundation and carried with the storm surge not far from where we were, that's just a stunning sight to see unfold here this morning.
Historically powerful storm. Okay, David, I know we're going to see you tonight, a special edition of World News Tonight from Panama City Beach. Our coverage is going to continue all day long online at abcnews.com. Hurricane Michael has made landfall, Category 4, 150-mile-an-hour winds. Have a good afternoon.
This has been a special report from